It was a lot safer than I thought it was going to be. So I'm trying to visit every country in the world, and obviously I'm going to have to go to countries that are considered slightly more dangerous. But I've been to a lot of countries that the UK Home Office have advised against going to, and I've always found that they're actually filled with the nicest people, and I've had the best experience in them. So it's kind of like you have to get your own perception of the world rather than just listen to what other people say, especially when these people actually haven't been to the countries that they're telling us not to go to.
What's the process like? Do they just say, we advise you not to, but they actually can't permit you or stop you from
Yeah,
going?
so basically, when that happens, they can't force people not to go, but because a lot of the time when the countries that they advise against going to, they don't actually have an embassy or any kind of place in that country that can help their citizens if they go. So I went to Afghanistan knowing full well that if I got into trouble there, I'm on my own. Like, they're not able to help. They don't have a diplomatic relationship with the Taliban at the moment because obviously they're going through a transition of government. So when the Taliban took over in 2021, all the embassies of like the Western countries pulled out, but they're slowly starting to come back. Like, I think there's about 9 or 10 embassies that have now been reinstated in Afghanistan, but they're mainly like Iran, Tajikistan, like the countries around there. But all like the Western countries are yet to do that. But I think over time, more and more will come back. But the whole procedure was that I had to go to an embassy, an Afghanistan embassy, but there's only a select few. So you can either go to one in Dubai, which that would be the route of flying into Kabul. But we were in Pakistan for the month prior, which borders Afghanistan, and the visa situation is a lot cheaper. So we got a visa in Islamabad. We had to go into the Afghan embassy, have our first like interaction with the Taliban, and they basically wanted to know why we were going. We didn't tell them that we were like travel content creators because we didn't kind of know what they would think of that, because obviously they really want good press at the moment. They don't want stuff negative to happen in their country. So by letting like travel bloggers into the country, it's kind of like a gamble on what our experience would be. But we had an amazing experience, and I kind of told the story how it was. Like, obviously, I saw some negative stuff, I saw some positive stuff, I saw stuff that what the media basically said prior to coming, that was completely incorrect. But yeah, it's just kind of like, obviously, I had a good experience there, but if someone else went, that's not guaranteed that they're going to have a good experience. It's just my own personal like view on the country. So I have to be pretty careful with how I word stuff in videos, because I don't want to make a video and then loads of people just decide to go and then something happens. So yeah, it's one of those places.
When you were there, what then were you seeing that shook you in the sense that it was against what the mainstream media was saying?
Well, before coming, I heard that like women aren't allowed to drive, women aren't allowed out on the streets by themselves. They have to be like with a guy. Um, Women aren't allowed in education. Some of it is true, don't get me wrong, but within the first hour of getting into Afghanistan, I saw two separate women driving cars. I saw some like maybe early 20s women walking out of university with books in their hand. And there is a ridiculous amount of women walking around in the streets, but you're not allowed to film women. That's like against the law. So when I was doing my like vlogs for YouTube, I had to be very careful with like the way I was positioning the camera. But yeah, prior to coming, I thought that there was going to be no women on the street whatsoever. But it got to the point where it became irritating filming because I had to always be watching like what I was doing.
What was the typical travel itinerary for Afghanistan? Because, usually with Jet2, if you're off to Magaluf or something, they have like a 14-day itinerary, but I suspect that's not the case.
Yeah, so you have two options when going into Afghanistan. You can either get a guide and a translator, which we did, mainly because we thought it'd be more helpful because we don't speak Dari, which is one of their languages, and you have lots and lots of interactions with the Taliban. It's probably, you can't drive for more than maybe 5 miles without a checkpoint where they stop you and you have to show your passports. Obviously, we had a translator that was explaining what we were doing, giving our passports. So our like interaction was just like a hello and a handshake. It wasn't us having to do anything. But basically, we crossed via the Torkham border, which is near Peshawar in Pakistan. So we crossed via that. It was a very bizarre border. Like, I've never seen chaos like that. There was guards on the Pakistan side just whipping people. They had like, like the whips that you would whip a cow, or like the farmer thing. It was that. There was just people getting whipped, and I have no clue why. Like, they were just not like, if they were not in line, they were getting whipped. There was children trying to run from Afghanistan into Pakistan, and it was like, the game that you used to play in school, Bulldog. It was like that, but the kids would try to get past, and if they got caught, they would get like hit by the end of like a weapon and stuff, and sent back into Afghan. But yeah, we had no problems at all. But I think that was because it was very obvious that we were foreigners. But yeah, the whole experience was just bizarre. I've crossed hundreds and hundreds of land borders, and I've never seen anything like this. But we finally crossed. We got picked up by our guide, and it was a 6-hour drive to Kabul, which is the capital. But we stopped in Jalalabad, which is another major city. Like, I don't know that much about Afghanistan, but I knew some of these cities purely because when the war with America was going on, like, these are quite common cities that you would hear the fighting was in. So it did feel quite surreal to basically be in these places. But there was no sign that there was like a war that's gone on for 20 years. Like, it's kind of been a lot more like built up and developed now. Like, don't get me wrong, there's still like a lot of like US military tanks that are basically, the US flag has been etched out and they've just put the Taliban flag over, which looks quite funny, to be fair. But yeah, like, you wouldn't honestly know that like a long war had gone on. Like, it has been built up.
Were there any other Western travelers that you came in contact with when you were there?
Yes, actually, we stumbled across a British girl that was solo traveling by. Well, she was with a guide, but I hadn't met her prior. But after like leaving Afghanistan, I've seen she's actually got quite a big social media presence. So that also kind of breaks the misconception that girls can't go there by themselves. Like, obviously, she's an experienced traveler, but like, she went by herself, and I asked her because she'd already been in the country 4 days prior, and her experience had been completely fine when we spoke to her.
What's even like the dress code? Can you wear Western clothes, or do you have to put on something more?
You can, as a guy, you can wear anything. Well, you can't really wear like what I'm wearing now or shorts, but a couple of days we just wore like a black t-shirt, but I can't remember the name of it. But I think it's called like a shaya kameez. It's basically the local robes, but we got one in Pakistan because in Peshawar it's a similar dress, but it looks like you're kind of wearing like an airy like long dress and you have everything covered, but it's actually really comfortable to wear. So we crossed the border wearing that, and then we bought another one in Kabul. But it's more just to respect the local culture. Like, you're in that country, so like, you dress accordingly. Like, it's the same if you go to any other Middle Eastern country. Like, if I'm in Abu Dhabi, I'm not going to wear this just out of the culture.